Ma'am, this section is for registered bidders only. Could you please step aside? The man's voice was polite, but it still hit like a slap. Everyone turned to look. I could feel the weight of their eyes, their quiet judgment, as if I'd wandered somewhere I didn't belong. My hands tightened around my purse. Across the aisle, my sister Marla tilted her head and smiled, that little smirk she'd practiced since we were kids. "She's just here to watch," she said sweetly, loud enough for the people in front to hear. Moral support. The crowd chuckled under their breath. The auctioneer adjusted his glasses and moved on, and I stood there for a second, pretending it didn't matter. The air inside the courthouse was thick with perfume and dust. Rows of seats filled with people who used to call my parents their friends. Some of them whispered condolences a few weeks ago at the funeral, now whispering about who would get the house. The house my parents built with 30 years of work and arguments and love. The house that was now reduced to a file number on a wooden podium. I stepped back slowly, my heels clicking against the tile, and found an empty seat near the wall. My heart was steady, not angry, just tired. Marla leaned over to whisper something to our brother Dale, who sat in the second row wearing a navy suit he didn't own 6 months ago. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. I knew that look already lived in his head, pity wrapped in superiority. "I told you she wouldn't register," Marla murmured. "She can't afford it." I didn't respond. I kept my eyes on the podium, pretending to read the auction pamphlet, though my mind was far from it. My name was printed right there on the bidders list they hadn't checked yet, but I didn't need to prove that. Not yet. My name is Sheila Stephen. I'm 38, an accountant in Omaha. I've spent most of my adult life doing quiet work that nobody notices until the numbers don't add up. Maybe that's why my family never really saw me. I wasn't loud enough to remind them that I mattered. When my parents passed, everyone assumed I was too soft to handle the estate or too poor to care. They never asked how I managed after losing everything 5 years ago. The job, the savings, the man who walked away when things got hard. They just wrote me off like an outdated bill. When you're used to being overlooked, silence becomes your second skin. You stop explaining yourself. You stop trying to be understood. You learn to watch. I watched now as Dale raised his bidder card, eager to claim what was never his alone. The auctioneer called out numbers, and people lifted cards like it was a game. My sister crossed her legs, eyes bright, already picturing herself redecorating the kitchen. My chest felt heavy, not from envy, but from memory. I could still see my mother at the dining table, folding napkins for holidays no one attended. My father oiling the porch steps so they wouldn't creak. They had both believed family meant protection. I'd learned it meant endurance. The man beside me leaned closer and whispered, "You related to the Stevens?" I nodded. He lowered his voice. "Heard the son's got money now. Guess it's staying in the family." I smiled faintly. "Something like that." He didn't notice the way my fingers pressed into my lap, or the calm that replaced every bruise those years had left behind. Marla laughed at something Dale said. I caught fragments. Mortgage, liquidate, get it over with. The words felt small, sharp. I looked at the sunlight cutting across the floor, catching the edge of the gavel in gold. I realized how much I'd changed. There was a time I'd have walked out, too humiliated to breathe the same air as them. But grief teaches you stillness. It teaches you that you can stand in the middle of people who think you're nothing and still feel whole inside. The auctioneer's voice echoed. "Opening bid, 100,000. Cards lifted, numbers climbed. Dale lifted his hand again. Marla followed, pretending to hesitate for effect. I stayed seated, quiet. Let them believe what they wanted. Each number brought them closer to a wall they didn't see coming. When you've been humiliated enough times, you learn patience. You learn that revenge doesn't need a stage. It just needs timing. I sat with my back straight, eyes forward, like I was watching a movie I'd already seen. My name still sat untouched at the top of that list. I thought about my parents again, about how they'd trusted Dale to handle the papers when Dad got sick, how Marla convinced Mom that selling off my share would simplify things. They called it love then. I called it theft in silence. It wasn't money I wanted back. It was respect, and today, in this room filled with whispers and perfume, I was going to take it quietly. The auctioneer's voice rose. 250,000. Do I hear 270? Marla lifted her paddle. Dale shot her a glare. She shrugged like it was a joke. They didn't see Mr. Lang, seated near the back, calm and patient, his briefcase resting neatly beside him. My briefcase. My proxy. I took a deep breath and glanced at my reflection in the glass door. I looked composed, detached, almost peaceful. But inside, something subtle shifted. It wasn't anger. It was power, the kind that comes when you stop needing anyone's approval. Going once? The auctioneer called. Going twice, Marla whispered. She'll regret coming here. Dale chuckled. She already does. I turned my head just enough for our eyes to meet. I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. Sold, the auctioneer declared, slamming the gavel down. Applause rippled softly around the room. Dale leaned back, proud. Marla clasped her hands together, her smile wide and empty. And I smiled too, but for a different reason. I didn't argue. I just smiled, because the man with the gavel didn't know whose name was on the top of that bidders list. My name is Sheila Stephen. I'm 38 years old, a freelance accountant living in Omaha. Most days it's just me, my laptop, and the quiet hum of my apartment. I've learned how to live small, not because I have to, but because it's easier that way. Easier to stay unseen than to keep explaining myself to people who already decided who I am. My family thinks I'm broke because I don't flaunt what I have. They call it concern, but what they really mean is disbelief. Disbelief that someone like me could stand alone without needing them. I wasn't always like this. There was a time I tried to prove myself, to earn a seat at the table my siblings guarded like a throne. But I learned that in families like mine, love comes with terms and ownership. Dale was always the one who knew how to play it. Charming, confident, loud. Marla had that practiced smile that made people trust her even when they shouldn't. And then there was me, the one who never fought hard enough. That's what they used to say when I lost something they wanted. After my parents died, I didn't ask for help. I handled the funeral, the paperwork, even the estate taxes, while Dale handled the charm. He convinced everyone that managing the family trust would be too much for me. You're always so emotional, he said once, like it was a weakness. I remember sitting across from him in my mother's kitchen, the smell of coffee gone cold between us, as he slid the papers across the table. It's just a formality, he added. You'll still have access. He lied without blinking. I signed because I wanted peace, not a fight. And peace was exactly what they gave me, by leaving me out of everything that came after. They sold the house my parents built, drained the accounts, and left me a letter with the words, "You'll understand someday." I never did. What I understood was that family loyalty ends where greed begins. Still, I stayed quiet. I rebuilt. I took small contracts from local businesses, managed books for people who forgot to say thank you, and paid every bill on time. The city became my witness. No drama, no spotlight, just consistency. Maybe that's why they all think I'm poor. They mistake simplicity for failure. It's funny how silence makes people invent stories about you. Maybe they need to believe I failed so they can feel like they won. I don't correct them. It's easier to let people live with their illusions. But deep down, I think they sense it. That kind of calm that comes from no longer needing their approval. And that calm, I've learned, makes people nervous. Sometimes I wonder if it's just me. If everyone who's been humiliated by their own blood ends up building walls that look like independence, but are really protection. I've met people who nod too fast when I say I'm fine. I see the same ache in their eyes, the kind that comes from being the one left out, the one used as comparison, the one who gets told to be grateful for scraps of affection. I sometimes wonder how many of you have been treated like you don't belong until you stop explaining yourself. If you felt that, stay with me. My family still lives in the same small town where my parents are buried. Marla teaches at the same school she used to gossip about, pretending stability is happiness. Dale runs a small dealership that's mostly built on debt and charm. He still calls me when he needs something signed, pretending it's business. "You're good with numbers," he'll say, as if that makes up for the years of silence. I answer politely, never reminding him that I was the one who fixed the taxes he neglected when Dad got sick. I think people like Dale believe kindness is weakness. They forget that endurance is its own kind of weapon. My quiet didn't mean surrender. It meant patience. Every time they mocked me, I learned. Every time they excluded me, I grew sharper. So when the estate auction was announced, I didn't feel anger. I felt something deeper, a calm recognition that life had circled back, giving me the kind of moment you don't ask for twice. I didn't plan revenge. It wasn't about that. It was about balance, about showing them that the person they treated like a burden was standing on her own, without excuses or apologies. I didn't need to raise my voice or make a scene. I just needed to show up and let the truth speak for itself. When I think back to the trust fund, to that day in my mother's kitchen, I remember his tone more than his words. The way Dale leaned back, pretending to care. "You don't really need this, Sheila. You're not the business type." I remember my mother standing by the sink, silent, complicit in her own son's manipulation. It wasn't cruelty that hurt the most. It was her silence, the kind that said, "Don't make things harder." I obeyed then. I won't again. It's strange how time changes what you feel. The grief dulls, the anger fades, but the memory stays sharp. I don't wake up wanting revenge. I wake up wanting peace. But peace, I've realized, doesn't come from forgiveness. It comes from clarity. And clarity is what I have now. About them, about myself, about what family really means when the masks fall. Sometimes in quiet evenings, I replay their laughter in my head. The jokes about how I never moved up, how I still rent, how I never aimed higher. They think I'm fragile. What they don't know is that I stopped measuring success by their yardstick long ago. I measure it in the quiet of my own apartment, the steady sound of my heartbeat, the peace that money can't buy and family can't take away. The world sees what you show it. I let them see nothing. And that's what makes what's coming next so satisfying. I've learned that the best revenge doesn't arrive loud or angry. It arrives politely, with proof. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. One new message. Marla. Her name alone felt like a tap on old bruises. I opened it without thinking. Her text was short, sharp, perfectly her. "Don't embarrass yourself today." I stared at it for a long second, the words sitting there like a dare. Then I smiled, because she still didn't understand. I wasn't the one about to be embarrassed. The courthouse smelled faintly of varnish and old paper, the kind of scent that drags memories from corners you thought you'd sealed off. I arrived early. I always do. It's easier to breathe when the crowd hasn't yet filled the space, easier to pretend it's just another day. The auction papers were stacked neatly on the front table. I ran my hand along the top page, feeling the ridges of the print like tiny scars beneath my fingertips. "Still thinking about backing out?" Dale's voice cut through the air before I saw him. He strolled in with that same swagger he'd worn since high school, the one that made people forgive him before he even asked. I turned slightly, keeping my tone even. "No reason to." He grinned, eyes sharp. "Good. Just don't cry when you can't keep up." I smiled politely, the kind of smile that doesn't reach your eyes. "I'll manage." That's how it always was with us. His confidence was a performance. My calm was survival. When we were kids, he'd crash my bike and my mother would tell me, "He's younger, sweetheart. Be patient." When he forgot chores, my father would laugh and say, "You're the responsible one, Sheila. You can handle it." They mistook endurance for strength. I learned early that some people don't love you less. They just expect more silence from you. As the room began to fill, the whispers started. "Poor Sheila," someone murmured behind me. "Can't believe she came." I kept my head high, smoothing the hem of my jacket. I'd worn navy today. Not for them, but for me. It was my way of reminding myself that composure is louder than pity. I could feel Marla's eyes on me from across the aisle. Her voice drifted over the crowd. She's probably just here for closure, she said, her tone soft and cruel at once. Dale chuckled beside her. Or maybe she's hoping for leftovers. The laughter was quiet, but sharp enough to slice through the air. I didn't react. That's the thing about humiliation. The more you resist it, the deeper it cuts. But when you stop resisting, when you let it pass over you like cold water, it loses its teeth. I sat down slowly, taking the bitters list from the edge of the table and placing it on my lap. My name was on it, though I doubted anyone here would believe that. The auctioneer tapped his gavel lightly, calling for attention. His voice was brisk, rehearsed. Welcome, everyone. We appreciate your attendance as we begin the sale of the Stephen family estate. My throat tightened for a moment at the sound of our last names spoken so formally. The word family didn't belong to us anymore. It was just branding now, a label stamped on a property that held too many ghosts. I glanced toward the front row where Dale and Marla sat like they were the hosts of this spectacle. Marla leaned toward him and whispered something that made him smirk. Then louder this time he said, "Well, let's hope the bids don't start too high. Some of us came with empty pockets." Heads turned. A few smiled awkwardly. The air shifted, the way it does before a storm. My hand stayed perfectly still on my lap. Inside, though, I felt the smallest tremor. Not from shame, but from recognition. That tone, that grin. It was the same one he used the day he tricked me into signing away the trust fund. I'd been 29, still naive enough to believe family couldn't betray family. I remember the pen in my hand, my mother's voice saying, "He's just trying to help, honey." And then the checkbooks vanished, the accounts drained, and every conversation after that ended with some version of, "You're fine, you always land on your feet." They never noticed how hard those landings were. They never saw me rebuild, piece by quiet piece, until I stood here again. The auction began. The numbers rose in quick succession, Dale's voice steady as he bid like he owned the air in the room. Marla pretended to look disinterested, though her foot tapped nervously against the floor. The crowd leaned in, watching the siblings battle for a house they'd already emotionally burned down years ago. I stayed still, watching. The rhythm of the bids was like the ticking of a clock, familiar, inevitable. Each shout from Dale felt like another childhood moment replayed in public. His triumphs, my silence. But I wasn't silent now. Not really. My calm had weight. My restraint had purpose. 240,000, the auctioneer called. Dale's paddle lifted. 260, Marla countered, glancing at him with fake annoyance. The audience murmured, entertained. I studied their faces. Neighbors, church members, people who once ate at our table and now watched us like a family drama. Their sympathy was worse than their judgment. Sympathy is just a softer form of disbelief. "Any other bids?" the auctioneer asked. Dale looked around, smug. "Guess that's it," he said, then turned toward me. "Unless someone's feeling brave today." His eyes flicked to my lap, to the paper I was holding. "What's that, Sheila? Notes on how not to lose again?" The laughter that followed was quiet, but I felt it echo. I didn't look away. "No," I said softly. "Just keeping track." He frowned, unsure whether it was an insult or not. I didn't clarify. Let him wonder. In that moment, the noise of the room faded. I could hear my own breathing, steady and slow. The sunlight, through the courthouse window, caught the edge of the bidder's list, making the ink shimmer faintly. I looked down, tracing the top line with my eyes, where my name was printed clearly. Not scribbled, not added last minute. Printed, registered, paid in full. The ache that had been sitting in my chest all morning eased a little. It didn't vanish, but it steadied, like a heartbeat finding its rhythm again. All the pity in that room, all the quiet cruelty, couldn't touch that one fact. I looked up and met the auctioneer's gaze. He smiled faintly, professional, but kind. "We'll begin with verified bidders in just a moment," he announced. Dale didn't catch the way his expression shifted as he glanced toward my row, but I did. And for the first time in a long while, my heart didn't break. It steadied. The gavel struck once, echoing through the courthouse like a pulse. The sound quieted the room, and for a moment all I could hear was the shuffle of papers and the faint squeak of a chair behind me. The auction was about to begin. I folded my hands in my lap, keeping them still, though my heartbeat had a rhythm of its own. "Let's begin with a fair opening bid," the auctioneer said, his voice smooth and practiced. I watched Dale straighten his tie, leaning back in his chair like he was the star of a show he'd already written. Marla crossed her legs and whispered something to him. He laughed under his breath, low and arrogant. "This will be quick," he muttered. I didn't respond. I'd heard that tone all my life, the confidence of someone who never imagined they could lose. When the first number rang out, the energy in the room shifted. Cards lifted. Dale jumped in early, his voice loud. 200,000? Another bidder hesitated, then followed. Marla leaned forward, her chin high. 220. The words came from her mouth like perfume, sweet but designed to choke the room. The crowd murmured. Everyone loved watching rich people fight. I sat quietly, my eyes on the auctioneer, not the stage my siblings were building. They had no idea the winner had already been decided long before they arrived. I had met Mr. Lang 2 weeks earlier in his small office above a diner. He'd been the executor of our parents' estate, a man who still carried the smell of old paper and tobacco in his suit. When I told him what I wanted, he'd hesitated. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked. I remember smiling faintly. "I'm not buying the house for them," I said. "I'm buying it for me." It wasn't about the building. It never was. The house was a symbol, one that had been used against me my entire life, a place where I was told to be patient, be understanding, let them go first. Every hallway held echoes of moments where my needs were too small to notice. Buying it wasn't revenge. It was reclaiming space. I wasn't buying wooden walls. I was buying silence back. The auctioneer called another bid. 285. Dale raised his hand again, forcing a smile at the crowd. 300. Marla's eyes flicked to him, her expression sharp. 320, she countered. Their game was predictable. They needed the audience more than the house. Winning was never about possession. It was about power. That's what made them so easy to read. I glanced around the room, the faces half familiar, all waiting for drama. They didn't see me as part of the story. They saw me as a spectator. Maybe that's what made this all so satisfying. The invisible one, quietly holding the one card that actually mattered. Mr. Lang sat near the back, calm and patient, his pen resting against a folded envelope. He didn't look at me, not once. But that was the point. There was power in not being noticed. There always had been. The bids climbed higher, voices rising with them. Dale's face began to redden, his smile thinning. Marla pretended composure, but her foot tapped faster. 375, she said. Dale shot back instantly. 400. The room murmured. Someone whistled softly. The auctioneer's tone stayed steady, like he'd seen this kind of pride 1,000 times before. For a brief moment, I let myself remember the last time I saw my parents in that house. My father sitting at the kitchen table, coughing into a handkerchief. My mother staring at the ceiling, lost in thoughts she never spoke aloud. They both believed Dale would protect what they'd built. They were wrong. I didn't come here to fix that, only to finish it. 420, Marla said, her voice tightening. Dale gave a low laugh. "You sure you can afford that?" She didn't answer. The room felt like it was holding its breath. I stayed still, calm, the hum of the ceiling fan steady above us. When the auctioneer's gavel lifted again, I knew this was the moment it would end. "Final call," he announced. "Any higher bids?" Dale glanced at Marla, waiting for her to flinch. She didn't. He raised his card one last time. 440. The auctioneer nodded slowly. 440,000 going once? Going twice? Mr. Lang didn't move until the room fell completely silent. Then in that same calm tone he'd used when we first met, he lifted his hand. 460. The whisper that spread through the courthouse was soft but immediate. Dale froze. Marla turned, scanning the crowd. "Who's that?" she asked, voice cracking slightly. The auctioneer's eyebrows lifted. We have a new bid from Lot 42 Holdings LLC. The words hung in the air like smoke. Dale frowned, trying to mask his confusion. Never heard of them. Marla forced a smile. Probably some investor. Doesn't matter. But it did matter. The sound of my heartbeat steadied again, slow and certain. Every insult, every dismissal, every be patient they'd ever thrown my way seemed to fade into the background. I watched them struggle to understand what had just happened. How someone they couldn't see had outplayed them without ever standing up. The auctioneer lifted the gavel one last time. Sold to Lot 42 Holdings LLC. The sound of the strike was final, clean, and perfect. The silence that followed the gavel strike was heavier than the noise that came before it. People leaned in, whispering. I could almost hear the curiosity spreading like a ripple through water. Lot 42 Holdings? Someone said near the back. Another voice followed, sharp with gossip. Never heard of them. Out-of-towners, maybe? Dale stood up fast, his chair scraping the floor. Who the hell is that? His voice cracked slightly, that thin edge of panic hiding behind arrogance. Marla frowned, clutching her purse a little tighter. Probably some investor, she muttered, but her eyes darted across the room, searching for answers she couldn't find. I didn't move. I kept my face calm, neutral, the way you do when you've already won, but no one else knows yet. Dale turned toward the auctioneer. You can't just sell it to some company without telling us who they are. The auctioneer adjusted his glasses, his tone clipped but polite. Sir, the buyer registered properly. Everything is in order. Dale scoffed, his voice rising. We're family. We have a right to know. I watched him, the way he puffed his chest like a man losing control of his own story. In moments like that, you learn everything about people. How quickly they panic when power shifts. How loudly they speak when they realize no one's listening. Marla leaned closer to him. Calm down, Dale, she whispered, though her hand trembled as she smoothed her skirt. Maybe we can make them an offer after. She turned to the woman beside her, offering a tight smile. He just gets protective, you know. Family property. The woman nodded, though her eyes were more entertained than sympathetic. I'd seen that look before, the same one I got after my accident 2 years ago, when I lost my shop. My little bakery, the one I'd built with long nights and borrowed hope, was gone in a day after a kitchen fire. Everyone said the same thing. It's a shame. Poor Sheila. She never had much luck. No one asked if I was okay. They just moved on, the way people do when they've already decided you're finished. They didn't know the insurance payout came months later, or that I invested it quietly, rebuilding without noise. Money doesn't change you. It shows who was never loyal when you had none. Dale was pacing now. Someone find out who they are, he said, his voice thick with irritation. Maybe they can be reasoned with. Marla crossed her arms. Reasoned with? You mean bribed? He glared at her. You don't know what they want. She smirked. Neither do you. The two of them started snapping in low, tense whispers, each trying to make the other smaller. The audience watched them like they were part of the show. And in a way they were. I sat still, feeling the calm rise inside me like quiet water. The kind of calm that comes only after you've stopped needing anyone to believe in you. My hands rested in my lap, my heartbeat steady, my breathing slow. I realized that for the first time in years, I wasn't reacting. I was observing. I wasn't the broken one in the story anymore. They were. Dale slammed his hand on the table. This is ridiculous, he said to no one in particular. They can't just hide behind a company name. His words bounced back to him in the hush of the room. The auctioneer cleared his throat. Lot 42 Holdings LLC, he said clearly, has fulfilled all requirements and holds the highest verified bid. If their representative is present, please step forward. The sound of those words filled every corner of that courthouse. Heads turned, chairs creaked. Dale's eyes swept the room, his expression growing tighter by the second. Anyone? He barked, his voice cracking just slightly now. Marla tugged on his sleeve. Stop making a scene, she hissed, but the panic in her tone betrayed her. I looked toward the back row where Mr. Lang sat, calm and patient as always, his hands folded neatly over the envelope on his lap. For a moment, I wondered if he'd hesitate, if he'd give me one last silent glance before standing. But he didn't. Without a word, he rose from his seat. A quiet gasp moved through the room. Dale blinked. Marla's mouth fell open just slightly. The auctioneer nodded respectfully. "Ah," he said. "Mr. Lang, representing Lot 42 Holdings." Everything slowed. The whispers that had started as gossip turned into confusion. People leaned closer to one another, trying to piece it together. Dale's voice came out smaller now, the first hint of doubt slipping in. "You? You're representing them?" Mr. Lang smiled faintly, the kind of smile that says nothing and everything at once. "Yes, I am." I could almost taste the silence that followed. Dale looked from him to Marla, then to the auctioneer, as if searching for someone to confirm that what was happening was real. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. For the first time, I wasn't the one trying to be understood. Have you ever stayed quiet just long enough for truth to speak on its own? Tell me if you'd have done the same. The air in the back office felt too still, the kind of quiet that makes you hear your own heartbeat. The blinds were half closed, stripes of light cutting across the old wooden desk. Dale and Marla sat across from Mr. Lang, their postures straight but restless. They'd walked in laughing, still glowing from what they thought was a victory. I stayed near the door saying nothing. Mr. Lang cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. "Thank you for waiting," he said. "The sale has been confirmed." He placed a small stack of papers on the table. His tone was professional, almost detached, but I could see the faint curve of understanding behind his words. He knew. Marla leaned forward immediately. "So, it's official? The house is ours?" She smiled at Dale, already half celebrating. "Guess all that effort paid off." Dale smirked, tapping his fingers against the armrest. "Told you no one could outbid me." Mr. Lang nodded, sliding the top document across the desk. "Yes, the sale is complete. Payment was verified earlier today." He paused before continuing, letting his words hang long enough for tension to find its place. "However, the ownership details are to be disclosed now, as per policy." Dale frowned. "Ownership details? We're the buyers." His voice lost a hint of confidence. "We signed everything." Mr. Lang looked up at him calmly. "You placed bids, Mr. Stephen. You did not purchase." I watched Dale's smirk falter, just slightly. Marla's smile froze in place. She reached for the document, her fingers trembling a little as she flipped to the contact section. Her eyes scanned the page, her lips parting as if she'd seen something impossible. Dale leaned over her shoulder. "What the hell?" Mr. Lang spoke before they could. "The property has been purchased in full by Lot 42 Holdings LLC." He paused again, and the silence stretched like glass. "Registered under the personal contact of Ms. Sheila Stephen." The room went quiet enough to hear the faint buzz of the fluorescent light above us. Marla blinked hard. "That can't be right," she said, her voice tight. "There must be a mistake." "There isn't," Mr. Lang replied. He turned another page toward them, tapping the signature line where my name sat cleanly, clearly. "Payment cleared this morning." Dale laughed, that forced kind of laugh people use when their pride starts cracking. "You?" he said, turning to me like I'd suddenly learned a magic trick. "You can't afford that. You don't even—" He stopped himself, realizing the words would only make it worse. I looked at him steadily. "I could, Dale. I just didn't need to prove it until now." My voice came out softer than I expected. It didn't sound like triumph. It sounded like peace. Marla leaned back in her chair, her fingers tracing the edge of the document without touching it. "So, you own it," she said quietly. "All of it." I nodded once. "Yes." I thought I'd feel satisfaction, maybe a spark of revenge burning somewhere deep. But what I felt instead was something smaller, lighter, relief, a kind of closure that didn't need applause. Mr. Lang gathered the rest of the papers, placing them neatly in an envelope. His expression softened as he turned to me. "Congratulations, Mrs. Stephen. You are now the sole owner of your family's estate," Marla called the next morning, her voice light and too sweet. We should have dinner. Tonight, she said. Just the three of us. To talk. I could hear the smile in her tone, that polished mix of guilt and control she'd perfected years ago. I paused before answering. Sure, I said quietly. To talk. I knew what that meant. It always started the same way. A friendly meal, small talk about work and the weather, followed by questions that weren't questions at all. I told myself I'd go, not out of obligation, but curiosity. I wanted to see how long it would take for the mask to slip. The restaurant was too nice for a family that claimed to be broke last week. Marla waved when I walked in, dressed in a soft pink blouse, pretending warmth. You look good, she said. Different. I smiled faintly. It's been a long week. She motioned for me to sit. I just thought maybe we could reconnect. You know, after all the tension. I nodded. After all the tension, I repeated, my tone even. The waiter poured water, and she filled the silence with talk about her kids, her house, Dale's new business deal. I listened the way you listen to background noise, hearing, but not holding. I could tell she was circling something. Every sentence had a soft edge, but the blade was underneath. You must be relieved, she finally said. Owning the house again, after everything? I met her eyes. Relieved isn't the word. She smiled tightly. Of course. I mean, it's not about the money, right? Family means more. I didn't answer. She sipped her drink, pretending she hadn't just measured my reaction. Dale arrived halfway through the meal, smelling faintly of whiskey and ego. He didn't bother with a hello. Oh, he said, sliding into the chair beside her. Heard you've been busy buying property. I kept my tone level. Something like that. He grinned, leaning back. You always surprise me, Sheila. One day you can't afford lunch, and the next you're outbidding everyone in town. Marla shot him a warning glance. Dale, stop. He ignored her. I'm just saying, must have been quite a payout. Insurance, settlement, lottery. His tone carried that familiar smirk, the kind that dared me to defend myself. I didn't. Does it matter? I said quietly. His smile faltered. Just asking. Marla placed her hand on his arm. We're happy for you, she said quickly. It's just surprising. I nodded. Surprising seems to be the theme lately. For a few minutes, the table fell silent except for the clinking of silverware. The music in the background felt too loud, the kind of calm that isn't calm at all. I looked at both of them, two people who had taken so much from me and were now trying to figure out how to take credit for my survival. Dale poured another drink, his eyes glassy. You know, I always said you'd land on your feet, he muttered. Didn't think it'd be this comfortable, though. Marla's husband, who'd been silent the entire time, chuckled under his breath. Guess pity finally pays. I stopped mid-bite and set my fork down slowly. Marla's fork clinked against her plate, a sharp little sound that broke the silence after her husband's comment. Enough, she said, forcing a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. We're all just tired. Let's not make this into something ugly. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for her water. Dale wasn't as graceful. Ugly. It already is, he said, leaning forward. She's sitting there acting like she didn't just buy the house out from under us. I looked at him, quiet, steady. You both had the same chance I did, I said. Nothing was hidden. He snorted. Right, except the money. His tone had that smug, bitter edge I remembered from childhood, the same one he used when he got caught lying but still wanted to sound superior. Marla sighed. Dale, please. But she wasn't defending me. She never did. The table felt smaller now. Every word seemed to bounce off the silverware and land heavy in the air. I kept my voice low. It wasn't about deserving. It was about closure. For a second, he stopped moving. Then he smirked. Closure? That what you call buying revenge? I met his eyes. No, that's what I call peace. He laughed once, short and humorless. Peace, sure. Nothing says peace like taking the roof your brother grew up under. His words hit the way they were meant to, like a reminder that, in his story, he was always the victim. Marla shifted uncomfortably, glancing between us. We all lost something, she said softly. Mom, Dad, the family we had. Can't we just move on? I smiled faintly. That's exactly what I'm doing. The waiter arrived with dessert menus, smiling like he hadn't felt the tension thick enough to cut. Would you like to see? No, I said before he could finish. I pushed my chair back slowly. I think I've had enough. Marla stood halfway, her voice quick, nervous. Sheila, don't leave like this. I paused. Like what? She didn't answer. She just looked small for once, unsure. Dinner was nice, I said quietly, though we both knew it wasn't. Take care of yourselves. I left before she could find something polite to cover the silence. The air outside was cold and clean. The restaurant lights glowed against the dark pavement, reflecting off wet asphalt from a drizzle that must have started during dinner. I pulled my coat tighter, breathing in the night air as my heart slowed back to its steady rhythm. As I walked toward my car, the memory came uninvited. My mother's frail hand gripping mine in that hospital room years ago. Her voice had been soft, fading between breaths. Don't let them destroy what's yours. Back then, I thought she meant the house. But now, standing in the cold, I knew she'd meant me. I reached the car, keys in hand, when I heard footsteps behind me. So that's it? Dale's voice carried across the lot, thick with alcohol and pride. I didn't turn around. Go home, Dale. He scoffed. You think this makes you better? You think buying a damn house fixes what you broke? I stopped walking. The sound of rain tapping the pavement filled the space between us. He stepped closer, his tone sharper now. You were always jealous, always needed to prove you were smarter. But you're still the same sad woman who had nothing until luck hit her. Something in me went still. Not angry, not hurt, just still. I turned slowly, meeting his eyes under the dim yellow light. He was swaying slightly, face flushed, mouth twisted into that familiar sneer. For a long second I said nothing. Then I spoke quietly, so he had to listen. You've mistaken silence for weakness your whole life. His smirk faded, just a fraction. I didn't wait for him to answer. I unlocked my car, opened the door, and paused long enough to look at him one last time. You should go home, Dale, before you embarrass yourself again. He said something under his breath. Cruel, maybe. But I didn't hear it. I was already closing the door. The parking lot lights flickered as if they couldn't decide whether to stay or fade. Dale stood a few feet from me, hands in his pockets, chin tilted in that same old defiance I'd grown up with. The rain had stopped, but the air still carried that damp, metallic scent. He laughed quietly, the kind that never reached his eyes. You'll lose it like everything else, he said. His words weren't loud, but they hit the air like gravel. I looked at him, steady. Then you'd finally be right about something. His smirk slipped, and for once, he didn't know what to say. That silence, it was the first time in years it belonged to me. I didn't fill it. I let it breathe, let it stretch between us until even he had to look away. He wiped at his mouth, muttering something about always playing the victim. But I didn't respond. I'd done enough explaining for one lifetime. That was the difference now. I didn't need to prove who I was anymore. I wasn't the one who needed to be believed. He took a step closer, his voice low. You think you won? You think this changes what people see when they look at you? I didn't flinch. Maybe not, I said softly. But I know what I see when I look at me. That's enough. He stared at me for a long moment, like he was trying to find the old version of me, the one who backed down, who tried to keep peace by shrinking. But she wasn't there. I saw him realize it. That tiny flicker in his eyes, that flash of uncertainty. It felt like the real victory. He finally scoffed, shaking his head. You always were cold. I nodded slightly. No, Dale. I learned to stop burning myself to keep everyone else warm. The words came out quiet, almost gentle, but they cut through the night cleaner than anger ever could. For a moment, neither of us moved. The only sound was the hum of the streetlights and the faint echo of traffic from the main road. I thought of how many years I'd spent carrying the weight of their version of me, the ungrateful sister, the outsider, the disappointment, and how light it suddenly felt to put it down. Peace feels different when you stop trying to prove innocence. It's not soft, not sweet. It's solid. Like standing barefoot on the ground after a storm and realizing the earth doesn't need your permission to keep turning. I could see his expression harden again, the shield returning. But it didn't matter. The truth wasn't something I needed him to accept. It was something I finally accepted for myself. I turned toward my car, the keys cold in my hand, and for the first time in years, I didn't look back. As I drove home, the windshield caught faint streaks of leftover drizzle, glinting under passing headlights. My reflection looked tired, yes, but clear. The noise of their voices, their judgments, their endless power games, all of it had started to fade behind me like the sound of a radio losing signal. Sometimes, silence says more than an argument ever could. I'd spent my life defending myself against people who decided their comfort mattered more than my truth. That night, I stopped defending. I simply let them hear what they'd never expected. Nothing at all. Would you let silence do your talking, or would you finally say what they never expected? When I reached my door, I felt that strange, steady calm that only comes when you've said enough. The porch light glowed faintly, catching the edge of something lying by the mat. An envelope, plain, cream-colored, no name on it. I picked it up slowly, the paper cool against my fingers. I didn't open it right away. I just stood there, listening to the quiet. The envelope felt heavier than it should have. I turned it over in my hands. No return address, no handwriting. Just the kind of silence that warns you before you even open it. Inside were papers, bank statements, official seals, my name printed where it shouldn't have been. At first, I thought it was another mix-up from the auction. But then I saw the dates. The loans went back years. My parents' old farm. The one Dale always said we had to sell because of my bad accounting. I'd believed him then. I'd carried that shame quietly, thinking maybe I'd made a mistake with numbers somewhere along the line. But looking at those pages now, I could see the truth in black ink and forged signatures. It wasn't me. It had never been me. There was a moment, a small, quiet one, where everything inside me settled. The years of guilt, the constant weight of being the responsible one who failed. It all went still. Not gone, just finished. I thought revenge would feel sharp and burning. Instead, it felt cold, almost clean. I picked up the phone and called Mr. Lang. He answered on the second ring, his voice calm, steady as always. "Ms. Stephen," he said, "I was expecting your call." I took a slow breath. Someone left an envelope at my door. It has copies of loan documents, old ones. They're in my name. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Do they mention the Crawford County property?" I looked again at the papers spread across my table. "Yes, that's the one." "I see," he said softly. "And the borrower's listed as Dale Stephen, correct?" I hesitated, my voice low. "Yes, but it also shows my signature beside his." Mr. Lang exhaled, long and heavy. "I suspected this might surface eventually. We found irregularities years ago, but your brother, he was persuasive. Your parents were in declining health. It wasn't the right time to confront it." I stared at the papers, tracing the loops of the forged signature. The handwriting looked practiced, almost perfect, but the slant was off. My heart didn't race. It just steadied. So the debt, the reason they said the farm had to go, it was never mine. "No," he said quietly. "It was his." I leaned back in my chair, the wood pressing into my shoulders. The sound of the refrigerator hummed behind me, ordinary and steady, like life was still the same. But nothing was. Everything I'd been blamed for had been built on this lie. For years, I'd carried the burden of a failure that wasn't mine. And Dale had walked around untouched, letting me take the fall for what he'd done. I thought of all the times he'd told me I didn't understand responsibility, how he'd called me too sentimental for business, how I'd swallowed it all, thinking silence was dignity. Now silence meant something else, power. "Mr. Lang," I said finally, "I need you to confirm something for me." "Of course," he replied. I spoke slowly, the words deliberate. "Did he forge my name?" There was a pause on the line, long enough to feel the weight of what came next. "Yes," he said. "He forged your name, Ms. Stephen." I spent the next morning at my kitchen table, the same place I'd once sorted bills and worried over numbers that never quite added up. The documents from the envelope lay in front of me, neat now, not like the storm they'd felt like last night. I called the bank first, asked for verification. My voice didn't shake. "Yes, I'll hold," I said, tracing the rim of my coffee cup. The woman on the other end was polite, cautious. After a while, she said she'd send confirmation to my email. Her tone changed when I mentioned Dale's name. When I hung up, I just sat there for a while. The sunlight came through the window, thin and quiet. I thought about how many years I'd let guilt drive me, how many apologies I'd given for things I hadn't done. I didn't want to destroy him. I wanted truth to do it. Around noon, there was a knock on the door. I knew that rhythm. 2 short, 1 long. Marla. I took my time opening it. She stood there with her coat half-zipped and a smile too soft to be real. "Hey," she said. "Can we talk?" I nodded and stepped aside. She walked in, pretending to glance around, pretending not to. "I heard about the auction. Must feel strange owning it now." I poured her tea without asking if she wanted any. "Not strange," I said. "Just settled." She smiled again, that careful kind. "Dale's been... well, he's upset. But you know how he is. He just needs time." I looked at her. Time doesn't fix character. She blinked, her smile twitching. "You've always had a sharp tongue, Sheila." "No," I said quietly. "I just stopped biting it." Her eyes flicked to the paper stacked beside me. "Bank documents?" I met her gaze. "You've always been curious." She laughed lightly. "I'm just worried about you. All this attention, the money, the house. You've never liked being the center of things." I leaned back, calm, unbothered. "You're right, I haven't. But this time I think I'll let the truth take the spotlight." Her fingers tightened around her teacup. "Dale's had a hard few years," she said softly. "He made mistakes." I nodded. "We all do. Some people just write theirs in other people's names." She froze, just for a second. The air between us changed. "What do you mean by that?" she asked. I gave a small smile. "Nothing that isn't already written down." She stood abruptly, setting the cup down too hard. "I came here because I care about family." "Then you should have started years ago," I said. My voice was steady. Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. She just stared at me, confused, maybe even a little afraid of how calm I was. Then she grabbed her coat and left without another word. The door clicked shut behind her. The silence after she left felt like a deep breath I hadn't taken in years. I gathered the papers, slid them into a folder, and placed them in the drawer beside my phone. It rang a few minutes later. An unknown number. "Ms. Stephen?" a man's voice said. "This is Carl from the auction house. The local paper wants to run a story on the mysterious buyer. Should we release your name?" My hand stilled over the drawer handle. "No," I said softly. "Not yet." But I smiled when I hung up, because I knew when I'd let them find out. The newspaper hit my doorstep before sunrise. The headline was impossible to miss. "Local woman buys back family estate in quiet bid." My name was smaller, but it was there. I stared at it for a long moment, then folded the paper neatly and set it on the counter. I didn't smile. I just felt still. Small towns don't need full stories to start talking. By noon, people who hadn't said my name in years were saying it again. The grocery clerk looked at me differently. A neighbor waved too long from her porch. Whispers have a sound of their own, soft, sharp, and fast. By afternoon, Marla stopped answering my texts. Someone told me she'd not been feeling well. Guilt always looks like illness when it has nowhere else to go. I knew Dale wouldn't hide. He never could stand silence. It didn't take long. Around 4, tires screeched in my driveway. The front door shook under his hand before I even reached it. "Open the damn door, Sheila!" I did. He pushed past me, face red, eyes wild. "You think this is funny?" he said, holding the paper in front of me like proof of sin. "You humiliate us. You make me look like some kind of fool." I met his glare. "You didn't need my help for that." His jaw tightened. "I'm suing you," he snapped. "Every dime you made from this, every cent from that house, belongs to the estate, not you. You hear me?" I stepped closer, close enough to see the sweat on his temple. "You really want to bring the law into this?" He didn't flinch. "Try me." I reached for the folder on the table and placed it between us. The same one from the envelope, the one with his handwriting pretending to be mine. "You might want to read the part where you sign my name." He froze. I could almost hear the moment his confidence cracked. His hand trembled slightly when he grabbed the papers, flipping through them fast. Too fast. "This doesn't prove anything," he said, but his voice was thinner now. I leaned against the counter, calm, steady. "It proves enough. You took loans against the farm. You forged my signature. And then you blamed me for losing everything." His mouth opened, but no sound came. I didn't fill the silence for him. I'd spent my life trying to explain myself to people who only listened when it benefited them. Not this time. "You'll destroy the family name," he finally said. I almost laughed. "You already did." He threw the papers down, his voice breaking into anger again. "You think this makes you better than me?" "No," I said softly. "It just makes me free." The clock on the wall ticked once, twice, filling the air that used to belong to his shouting. He looked at me, searching for the sister he could manipulate. She wasn't there anymore. He stormed out without another word, the door slamming so hard the frame shook. I waited until I heard his car peel away, then picked up the papers and slid them back into their folder. The light outside was starting to fade, soft orange against the trees. For the first time, I felt like the house was truly mine, not because I'd bought it, but because I'd stopped apologizing for it. "She's lying," Dale said the second we walked in. "She forged everything." I sat 2 rows back and folded my hands, letting his words skim over me like dull rain. The courtroom felt cool. I focused on the wooden rail in front of me, the small scuffs where other hands had rested. Justice isn't loud. It's patient. His attorney rose, polished voice steady. "Your Honor, my client maintains that Ms. Stephen manipulated estate proceedings." The judge lifted one eyebrow and asked for evidence. Papers shuffled, shoes whispered. A bailiff coughed once. I kept breathing slow. Truth doesn't hurry. Mr. Lang sat at the end of my row, an anchor. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. Across the aisle, Marla stared at the floor. Dale kept talking even when no question had been asked. "She stole the house with a shell company. Lot 42, whatever. She calculated this." His voice thinned on the last word. Calculation wasn't his skill. Blaming was. The judge turned to me. "Ms. Stephen, do you intend to speak today?" I rose and said, "Only if the court has questions." My tone surprised even me. It made space. The judge nodded. "We'll see." They called the loan officer from the bank. She swore in, hands steady. "Did Ms. Stephen authorize loans against the Crawford farm?" the attorney asked. "No," she said. "Our records show the borrower as Mr. Dale Stephen. The cosigner line is disputed." "Disputed how?" "We flagged the signature 3 years ago after an audit," she said. "The slant and pressure were inconsistent with prior samples." Dale shifted in his seat. The leather groaned. "So you're saying my client forged it?" the attorney asked. The witness chose care. "I'm saying it raised material concerns that were reported to counsel." They called Mr. Lang next. He carried the old paperwork like glass. "As executor," he said, "I sought verification and notified the family of irregularities." "Which family members?" "Both Ms. Stephen and Mr. Stephen," he said. "Mr. Stephen declined to meet." The judge leaned forward. Did you observe pressure on the estate to liquidate the farm to satisfy private debt? Yes, he said. From whom? From Mr. Stephen. Each syllable landed like a small stone. My turn came. I walked to the stand, placed my hand on the Bible, and told the truth the simple way. I didn't want to destroy him, I said. I wanted truth to do it. The room held that sentence without blinking. Why purchase the house through a company? The judge asked. Safety, I said, and to keep the auction fair. Did you misrepresent anything? No, I said. I followed the rules they set. I didn't look at Dale. I didn't need to. Dale's attorney tried a different door. Isn't it true you benefited from your brother's hardship? No, I said. I benefited from my own work and from not lying. He smiled without humor. You're very composed. I finally don't owe anyone a performance, I answered. The court reporter paused, then kept typing. The judge asked for the exhibits. The bailiff carried the folder to the bench. Pages turned. Time stretched. I watched dust spin in the angled light and thought about how long it takes for a life to come back to itself, and how quietly it can happen. When the judge spoke again, the voice was even. Mr. Stephen, the court finds substantial reason to question the authenticity of the co-signer's signature and the narrative presented here today. Dale blurted, She planned this, as if planning were a sin instead of a skill. The judge lifted a hand. Silence fell. Counsel, the judge said to Dale's lawyer, you may wish to discuss settlement options. The attorney swallowed. Yes, Your Honor. Dale turned toward me, eyes hot, and hissed, You'll regret this. I felt nothing rise to meet it. Calm isn't weakness, it's a choice. The judge closed the file and looked over the room. This matter won't be tried on bluster, the judge said. It will be tried on documents. Then the order came, clean as glass. We'll open an investigation into the alleged forged signatures. Dale's face drained. I let the quiet finish speaking. I unlocked the front door and stepped in. The house smelled like dust and old wood. Sunlight made rectangles on the floor. I closed the door and heard the click that used to mean everyone was home. Now it meant quiet. I walked slowly, like the rooms could bruise. The living room held the same sag in the couch where my father used to sit. The carpet was thin where our feet passed. I let my fingers hover over a chair and chose not to touch it. In the kitchen, a dust line showed where the toaster used to be. I stood by the sink and looked out to the yard. The tree we planted when I was 10 rose above the roof now. I remembered peach pie and how Dale scraped his fork till my jaw ached. Marla laughed when he said I cut the slices too small. He wanted more. I made do. I opened cabinets and found 3 chipped mugs and a glass with a crack like a river. I set them on the counter and left them. I was not going to pack memories by the pound again. I would not ask objects to fix what people broke. The hallway creaked in the spot outside the bathroom. I stepped over it without thinking. An old habit of walking around noise. My bedroom door was half open. The wallpaper had peeled in one corner. I sat on the edge of the bare bed frame and listened to an airplane pass. As a girl, I counted them and wished to be elsewhere. The closet held a shoebox of photos. I carried it to the floor and opened the lid. My parents at the county fair. Dale in a baseball uniform. Marla with straight hair and tired eyes. Pictures of me pressed to the edges. A hand on someone's shoulder. A smile that did not show teeth. We were a family that loved through chores and corrections. I learned to disappear on cue. I went through every photo and set one aside. It was small and soft at the corners. My mother stood on the porch with her apron on, head tilted. I was beside her, maybe 8, holding a jar of buttons we sorted by color that morning. We looked serious, like order was a language. We shared. 2 words were written on the back in blue pen. Keep going. I put the rest of the photos back and closed the box. I did not want to carry the weight of our arrangements anymore. I was not buying wooden walls. I was buying silence back. And I had enough to spend. In my parents' room, the dresser was empty except for a safety pin and a church program. I held the paper and then set it down. Peace is not possession. It is permission to walk away. I said it out loud. The mirror showed my face when no one is watching. Older around the eyes. Steady. I made a short list in my head. The furniture would be sold, the dishes too. Money would go to small repairs where I live now, and the rest would stay put. I did not need to prove I could own a past. I needed to prove I could leave one. I walked through each room and opened a window to let the air move. The house breathed. I did not say goodbye. I said thank you by putting things back where they belong. In the living room, I slid the photo into my purse. I stood by the mantel and looked at the ceramic bird. I left it. I left the mugs. I left the couch dent and the worn patch of carpet and the hallway that creaked when you stepped on it, not as a punishment, as a release. I took the keys from my pocket. They were colder than I thought they would be. I placed them on the mantel where the dust was thickest and listened to the faint sound they made against the wood. The afternoon held its breath. Then I walked to the door, closed it behind me, and let the latch catch. The auction hall was brighter than I remembered. Morning light cut through the tall windows and made everything look clean, almost hopeful. I stood at the back, near the exit, the same way I had before. The air smelled like varnish and paper, the quiet before voices began to place their value on things that once held mine. The auctioneer raised his gavel, smiling that polite professional smile. Lot 42, he said. The Crawford property, including house and land. My pulse didn't change. I'd already let it go once. This was just the echo. People murmured. The bidding started low, cautious, then climbed. I watched a young couple near the front glance at each other before raising their number. Their fingers brushed. The sound of their whisper carried more weight than any offer before it. I caught the faint tremor in Marla's shoulders across the room. She stood by the doorway, half hidden behind a column, pretending she hadn't come. Her posture said otherwise. Guilt has a shape you can recognize even in silence. The auctioneer called, "Do I hear 320?" The young woman nodded. The man beside her smiled. 320, the auctioneer confirmed. Marla shifted, eyes darting from them to me. I didn't move. When the hammer finally came down, the sound was small but final. Sold, he said, to the young couple in the front row. Applause followed, quiet and respectful. I closed, my eyes for one heartbeat. That word, sold, didn't sting. It released something that had been rusted shut for years. I thought of my mother's voice the last night I saw her awake. Don't let them destroy what's yours. Back then, I thought she meant the house. Now I knew she meant peace. Marla turned toward me, searching for anger or triumph. I gave her neither. Our eyes met for a second, and I saw defeat trying to dress itself as dignity. I let her have it. Some things don't need correction. The young couple approached the auctioneer, their faces glowing with the future. I remembered that kind of glow once, hope wrapped in plans, love still believing it could fix everything. They thanked him, signed the papers, and held hands as they left. I smiled faintly and whispered to myself, sometimes letting go is the loudest revenge. The hall began to empty. Chairs scraped, footsteps faded. I felt the calm weight of closure settle where pain used to sit. The auctioneer noticed me lingering and walked over. Miss Stephen, he said gently, should I forward the proceeds to your account? I met his kind eyes and shook my head. No, I said. Let it stay here a while. He hesitated, then nodded with quiet understanding. When I stepped outside, the sun was higher now, touching the windows of the house across the street. I didn't look back. I'd already done enough looking. Some endings don't require witnesses. They just require you to walk away when it finally feels light enough to do so.